Good day and welcome to your news at noon on Kaieteur Radio. I'm Kevin Smith. As oil production increases offshore and ExxonMobil Corporation and its partners continue to add more ships, Guyana is set to lose out hundreds of millions this year due to the failure of the government to renegotiate the Stabroek Block production sharing agreement. If the royalty from the new model contract is applied to the Stabroek Block, Guyana could earn a lot more each year. For example, Guyana's last royalty payment could have been about 230 million US dollars if the royalty for the project was 10% instead of the industry low 2%. For the last quarterly payment for 2023, Exxon and its co-venturers paid $12 billion to Guyana's natural resource coffers. This represents 2% of the crude produced and sold for the previous year. If this was 10%, it would have been 288 million US dollars. Hence, Guyana has lost out on the opportunity to earn 230 million US dollars for oil produced in just 3 months because the PPPC administration refuses to pursue a better royalty payment. The permit granted by the Environmental Protection Agency authorizing ExxonMobil's third project in the Stabroek Block, the Kaieteur development, required the operator to conduct a study to determine the feasibility of re-injecting 100% of the produced water from the reservoirs. Produced water is a liquid that is extracted during oil production activities. It contains dissolved mineral salts or may be mixed with organic compounds such as acids, waxes, and mineral oils. Due to its toxicity, this substance is best re-injected into wells, though this may be a costly exercise. The EPA permit for the Kaieteur project required that a study be done by permit holder to investigate the feasibility, benefits, and implications of this alternative. It must be noted that even though the permit to Exxon provides for treatment of the produced water prior to dumping it, it also made it clear that this condition was subjected to the outcome of the investigation. And the Criminal Law Amendment Bill of 2022 has been modified to ensure the constitutional rights of accused persons are protected. The adjusted legislation was successfully passed in the National Assembly Monday evening. The revised bill amends Section 72 of the Criminal Law Act, and it follows the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice in the case of Marcus Bisram versus the Director of Public Prosecutions. Bisram, who was accused of murder, was discharged by the magistrate who heard the evidence at the preliminary inquiry into the murder charge. Consequently, the DPP directed the magistrate to reopen the PI and later to commit Bisram to trial, with which the magistrate complied. And Esso, the subsidiary of ExxonMobil, is currently hunting for local consultants to conduct biodiversity assessments and environmental monitoring for the company. In a request for information available on the Ministry of Natural Resources website, Esso explained that it is seeking consultants interested in conducting consultancy services for onshore and nearshore biodiversity assessments and environmental monitoring in Guyana. It was explained that through 2023, ESSO has conducted a series of environmental studies and monitoring activities which provide a scientific understanding of current state of the environment, as well as the social and economic needs of communities in Guyana. As such, to continue these programs, the company plans to put in place enabling agreements for the provision of onshore environmental, regulatory, and socio-economic services. And moving on, a Kaieteur driver on Saturday was stabbed, chopped, and robbed at knife point at Eccles, East Bank Demerara, by his friend after giving him a free drop. The Kaieteur driver, according to information, saw the suspect standing in front of an auto dealership along the Eccles public road and offered him a lift to Georgetown. There, the suspect stabbed and chopped the driver about his body as he reached in the victim's pockets. The entire ordeal was captured on security cameras mounted on nearby buildings. The driver was seen trying to bar the chops and stabs with his forearm. We understand that had it not been for the intervention of a licensed firearm holder in the vicinity, the driver could have died. And moving on, a laborer on Tuesday was crushed by a log at the Mackenzie Sports Club ground at Linden, Region 10. The dead man was identified as 43-year-old Cledwin Richard of Linden-Soosdijk Highway. The MSC ground is presently under construction, and according to police, Richard was employed by a contractor who was contracted to drive piles at the site. Reports are that the laborer was walking on one of 6 logs that were stacked on each other on the ground when he fell between another log. As a result, the log rolled down and crushed Richard's head before he could have gotten out of the way. His co-workers rushed to remove the logs but found Richard's lifeless body underneath. Investigations are ongoing. And to wrap things up, the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, or ACM, and IFEX ALC network have condemned in the strongest possible terms the intimidation of journalists in Guyana. IFEX ALC is an alliance of IFEX members promoting and defending the right to freedom of expression in Latin America and the Caribbean. In a statement on Tuesday, the regional and international bodies called on the government of Guyana to immediately set the tone for a cessation of such acts that ultimately serve to fertilize the ground for an escalation of such acts that can ultimately lead to physical harm. The ACM and IFEX ALC further implored the government to urge its supporters to refrain from intimidatory behavior. It was outlined that Guyana is a signatory to the Media Freedom Coalition, which recognizes that a strong democratic tradition requires a free and fair media. Threats and harassment of journalists run counter to that principle. And just before we wrap up, we need to turn the pages of today's Kaieteur News to page 7 to end the newscast with a little bluntness. Knocking groups, knocking reports, knocking people. Any group that PPP leaders doesn't like has to go down. Any report that makes the PPP government look bad is trashed. Any question that causes the PPP problems is canned. Any journalist that makes the PPP nervous is smeared. Thanks to the PPP for this kind of democracy. And that brings us to the end of today's News at Noon. I'm Kevin Smith. Thank you for listening.
Want value for your advertising dollar? Then place your ads on Kaieteur Radio's newscasts. Streamed live on 6 different mediums, reaching hundreds of thousands. Advertise today and watch your dollar grow. Call us on 225-8465 or 226-8210 today.
Wanting to protect your family during these difficult times of COVID-19 is natural.
Stay at home, wash your hands often, and don't touch your face.
Yes, Daddy.
But are you doing these things too? And do you practice social distancing? Do you keep 3 to 6 feet away when you're shopping? Or at least stay an arm's length away in the supermarket? Remember, children learn from adults. So if you're not obeying the precautions, neither will they. We have to work towards the new normal together to keep our families safe and protected. Be part of the solution, don't add to the problem. Teach by example and do the right things.